It shows that if you are mindful, so for instance, you meditate or you journal or you go walking, it's really good for your spiritual being. And that helps with decision making, because in the end, you probably recognize this. When you go for a walk, you have all these great ideas, all these problems you have in your head, you suddenly find a solution. And this is all because of your mind settling down. You are able to make better decisions afterwards.
To help the audience understand your background and your mission, I'm going to use analogy scenery. If your career path or your life was a river, where did it begin? What major turns has it taken? And where is it flowing now?
Oh, that's a very nice question. It started in the summit of my parents, of course, somewhere high up in the mountains in the country of the Netherlands, which is totally flat. So we don't have any mountains. It started near Rotterdam, and I was born and raised by a very warm family. My parents taught me that I was privileged. I still am, I think, because I live in the Netherlands. The social security system is okay. We had money, and after a few years, we were able to travel as well. So we were doing fine. And basically, I took that lesson that we are privileged where I live. I'll still use that today with my own kids and also within the things I do at my line of work. It took a few turns. I spent time in Egypt. I spent some time in New York. So I learned a bit about other cultures as well, and also how they live and how the society is over there and how people are sometimes not as good off as we are. So that inspired me basically to do what I do now, which is help people achieve financial peace of mind. I also try to help them make better decisions for themselves and all the people they care about. There's a lot of turns there, I think, but this is basically the fast version.
And where is the river flowing now in your current life?
The river is widening, so it's getting easier. There's not a lot of current anymore. I know where I'm heading to with my family here near Rotterdam. I wrote a few books. I have a podcast, do quite a lot of speaking about this subject. And the river needs to end in a big sea or ocean or lake where I inspire at least 10 million Dutch-speaking people and over 100 million English-speaking people. So that's where the river is flowing to. I work in asset management, so this is basically what I do today. Yesterday I had a public talk somewhere, and it's always great to hear people tell you that not only the talk was okay, but moreover that they learned something out of it and they can actually use that in their personal life to change some things to the better, of course, not only for themselves, but also for the people around them. You shouldn't be too selfish.
I want to delve into the multifaceted nature of decision-making and how you provide insights into cultivating a healthier relationship with the fundamental aspect of human experience, and how you empower individuals to make more mindful choices that align with their authentic selves and create the lives they truly desire. Every day, we're faced with countless decisions, ranging from the mundane, what do we have for breakfast, to the life-altering, whether we accept a new job or pursue a new relationship or start a new business. So our ability to make sound decisions is crucial to navigating the complexities of life and creating the reality that we desire. The process of decision-making is far from straightforward, as it involves the intricate play of cognitive, emotional, and behavioral factors. And they're all influenced by the intricate workings of our brains. At the cognitive level, our decision-making is shaped by our beliefs, our values, and thought patterns, and we use mental shortcuts or heuristics to simplify complex information. But these can sometimes lead to cognitive biases that can distort our judgment. And emotionally, our mood and past experiences can profoundly impact our choices, because the anticipation of regret or fear or loss or desire for social approval, that can sway us even in ways that we may not even recognize. Lastly, behaviorally, our habits, our impulses, and external influences such as social norms or peer pressure can significantly influence our actions. When I look at some of these factors, how can we cultivate greater self-awareness and mindfulness to recognize the cognitive biases and emotional influences that may be distorting our decision-making processes?
It basically starts with knowledge. I find that most people do not even know what you were talking about. Probably your listeners will, but a lot of people I talk to are not really aware of all the heuristics and all the cognitive biases and stuff. They don't know. So you also don't know how you're being influenced by yourself, by your past, by the things that's happening around you, by your friends, your family. And I think it starts with knowledge. When you learn why it's so easy or comfortable to follow the group, if you understand why that is, it's also easier sometimes to make another decision. So do not follow the group for sometimes. It's a better choice. But if you don't understand what's going on in your mind or in your brain, why you do this, it's hard to change your decision making, therefore hard to change the outcome. So that's what I usually try to do, is to not lecture, but educate people more about why do we do the things we do and what happened and how do you change that, or at least do you learn all those heuristics and cognitive biases you were talking about earlier. If you start learning those, you'll see them everywhere around you, all those little things, this is influencing me, which is perfect. It's not a problem at all. You can't stop it. But as long as you recognize a little bit more, it's much easier to sometimes stop, look at yourself. What is it I'm doing here? Am I making this decision because I really want to, or because I'm influenced by someone else, maybe even by a company or an ad on TV or radio or whatever? So that helps. Especially it helped myself as well. Every time when there's a stressful situation or a life-changing situation, I try to step back and with a bird's eye view, watch myself and determine whether I'm doing the right thing.
When you look at the younger people, their decision-making process are significantly influenced by developing their prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for impulse control and rational decision-making. We know it doesn't fully mature until the mid-20s, but meanwhile, the limbic system associated with emotions and reward-seeking behavior develops earlier. This whole neurological imbalance can lead to riskier decision-making in younger people or in teenagers. I think it's good to start with young people. How does it affect their decision-making capabilities?
Well, that is a very good example you were telling us, because when you're young, you're not able to make proper decisions yet. Therefore, I think as parents, we need to guide our children with certain decisions, and they have to make a lot of mistakes because that's the way you learn. Well, you have to make sure they don't kill themselves or injure someone. It's summertime when we're recording this. And hello, I have some friends who have children 17, 18 years old. They're going on a trip to the beach where there's a lot of girls and guys, and they're trying to be the best selves. I talked to some of my friends, and a few of their sons actually tried to walk to a girl and started talking. And because they were confident they were the guy for this girl, because they don't know yet, but they have to make those decisions where the girl says, no, I don't like you, go away. All these little examples you can think of help us shape our way we make decisions, especially the young people where you were talking about. Yeah, they don't have a conscience yet, for instance. So it's very hard for them to make decisions where they take other people into regard because they solely think about themselves. But you need to go through this basically, and we need to guide them through that process. So in the end, hopefully they come out as normal people. I'm not sure if there are normal people in the world at all, but
well-rounded individuals.
Let's call it that, yeah.
In what ways might peer influence or societal factors interact with the developing limbic system in adolescent decision-making? How can understanding these neurological factors help us in developing effective interventions for risky adolescent behavior?
Yeah, I have a friend who is a kickbox champion. He's fighting for glory. He's a really good, proficient fighter. And if you walk into him in a dark alley, you think, oh no, this is going to go bad. He's very tall, broad-shouldered guy, always wearing sports suit. But he's the kindest guy. He would definitely stop and help an elderly lady cross the road. He's an example for a lot of young guys in his developing crime, especially the younger ones. He is going out on the streets and they know him because he's on TV. He tells them not to do this certain behavior. Do not rob this person or do not throw this brick. And he has a major influence in that particular neighborhood because he's an example and they look up to him and they see him as a guy. He's a big fighter, so he's strong. He's a tough guy, but he shows them what is the right way to live your life, basically. That's a very strong way to help younger people. We all look for examples, right? But if you have a rich friend who made a lot of money because he stole a car, that's also an example, which is a terrible example, of course. But you need role models, especially for younger people. We as parents can be role models, but also during the Olympics, there's a lot of role models. And all these stories and also your social group around you are also your role models. So if you are able to create a environment with people which are inspiring and showing you how it's done or showing you great examples how to create a better life, that definitely helps young people. But still, everyone probably stole some candy in a store. So you need also to go through those processes. You shouldn't go out of bounds, basically. That's what it is. And role models is a very big thing, especially for younger people, when you talk about the social group and the peer group.
And what strategies or techniques can we employ to better align our decisions with our core values and long-term goals rather than succumbing to impulses or short-term gratification?
First have to know what your long-term goals are. And that's also a main thing. If you do not know who you are, or if you don't have a plan, you will definitely become a part in someone else's plan, meaning you're doing something for someone else instead of yourself. So that's a very good question, because it all starts with knowing who you are, basically, and what you really want, what makes you tick, right? If you know that, then it's much easier to create your own path or float down your own river instead of going after the next hype, which is around the corner. I always tell my clients or people I talk to, for instance, if you go investing, why do people start investing in the stock market? The only reason I can find is because I need a certain amount of money in the end so I can live my life. So if you don't know what you want, you shouldn't even start. It's very important to first know what you really want and then create a vision how to get there. And then it's easier to change your decision making, because you can always go back to your vision and your plan. And is this really helping me? Maybe not. So let's reconsider or ask an expert to help me make this decision.
That brings in supportive environments. The question that comes up in my mind is, how can we create supportive environments and social circles that encourage thoughtful decision making and hold us accountable to our aspirations?
I saw on the news yesterday, the Olympics. There was a little part on the news on a Dutch group of young people, I think 16, 17 years old. They are living in quite a bad neighborhood. And these 50 young people were sent to Paris to become hosts and bartenders in the Holland House, which is the house where all the Dutch supporters go and have a drink after a game. There was an interview with one of the girls, and she said, "This is so inspiring for me because they give me the responsibility to be a host here. No one ever gave me responsibility and no one ever trusted me something this big." And it wasn't really a big thing for me, but for her, no one ever trusted her or gave her any responsibility. And you saw this girl, and to answer your question, if you want to help young people, you should support them, always have their backs. Be their, not really their guide, better their Sherpa. Different probably, but a guide is walking in front of someone, whereas a Sherpa is walking behind you and giving you advice sometimes. Maybe you should reconsider, because the mountain is very steep here. Please go back. If you do that and give young people responsibility, because in the end, everyone wants to be a good person. Well, 99.9% of people. But we have to give them responsibility and the support and the trust that they actually are worth something.
That's absolutely right. It is to give younger people responsibility, especially when they haven't been afforded that opportunity before. They have to start to not only take responsibility, but hold themselves and others who can hold them accountable, so that they have a benchmark of what they're doing as they go on in their lives or as they go through their responsibility. I wanted to ask you about stress, because many studies have demonstrated acute stress can significantly alter decision-making processes. If you're under stress, your body releases cortisol, which impairs the function of the prefrontal cortex, which we know is the seat of planning and judgment. And that can lead to more habitual, less goal-directed decision-making. But also, stress can cause a shift from a deliberative to an intuitive decision-making strategy.
Which is basically the main function of stress, right? Let me explain it like this. What I usually tell people is stress is a perfect system to survive, basically. For instance, 200 years ago, suppose we were walking on the African plains, clad in a leopard skin. We were foraging for little berries and stuff like that. Suddenly we see some movement in the grass. It seems yellowish. Oh, and it's a lion. So then you are probably getting really stressed out because it's a lion who might be out there to kill you. So what you do is you try to escape, you run for a tree or whatever. You start running and trying to survive. Might be your strategy. But what also happens when you're running away from the lion, heading for the tree, you lose your context. You don't know where you are anymore. Sometimes see it perfectly in movies where people start running for a murderer and they don't know where they are because they just forgot all the surroundings because they're heading for the safe space. This is the goal of stress, getting you out a stressful, dangerous situation. However, you lose your context. Also with normal decision making, if you are stressed out because the stock market plummeted, you lose the context why you were investing and you're solely focusing on the downturn in the market. Because you lose the context, you are not able to make perfect decisions. Cortisol is one of the systems that triggers this system. Same with adrenaline and dopamine, all these other little things we know of help us survive or relate or get stronger, but they don't help us in the long run if you want to make a proper decision. So if you know this, you will still get stressed out by a market downturn or a lion in the grass. You should be aware that's not the moment to make major decisions. Get out of the situation and then look back and what happened and what should I do now? All these, like you said, cortisol, adrenaline, serotonin, these are perfect hormones we use to survive as a species, but they don't help us in the long run.
I'm interested in your view of how do you think spiritual practices like meditation affect the physiological stress response and then subsequent decision making?
There's a lot of research on that as well. It shows that if you are mindful, so for instance, you meditate or you journal or you go walking, it's really good for your spiritual being and helps with decision making because in the end, you probably recognize this. When you go for a walk, you have all these great ideas, all these problems you have in your head, you suddenly find a solution. And this is all because of your mind settling down. You are able to make better decisions afterwards. It's really smart to start journaling, start meditating, start walking every day, 30 minutes. It's perfect. It really helps. For instance, if you go out in the sunshine or daylight, your cortisol level will drop, which is perfect.
We live in an age of uncertainty, and in the face of uncertainty, there are many high stake decisions that people may need to make. How can we strike a balance between gathering information, trusting our intuition, and taking calculated risks?
Yeah, it starts with counter questions. What kind of information do you need for your personal decision making? And if I answer that question for myself, I stopped watching the news in general because it's always bad news. It's war, economic stuff, climate change, whatever it is. It's always bad news. Does it affect me today? Probably not, because I don't live in Israel or Palestine, right? I don't live in the Middle East. So it doesn't affect me, but it does influence me. It makes me sad. It makes me insecure. So I might actually do other things because of my feelings. And I can't change it at all. I always try for myself to gather information which is useful for my personal situation. I try to steer away from the world news, which I can change. And that really helps because I know terrible things are going on. Of course, I'm not oblivious to that. And I used to watch everything every second of the day and I stopped. So that's really relaxing. And of course, I try to give money to good causes and stuff like that. But still, I try to gather information I need. I use experts for that as well because I don't know anything at all about most subjects. So sometimes if it's important, I ask someone who's an expert in this field, which is also a good thing because I get rational information I need. So it's easier to make a decision which is well informed instead of mainly intuition. And to end this answer, of course, your intuition is always important because there's intuition for a reason. So always listen to your gut feeling because it tells you something, but try to understand what it is telling you. So then you can decide if you want to carry on or do something else.
This goes back to your point of knowing yourself. You spoke earlier, you've traveled, you've been to Egypt and other countries. In that vein, that makes me think of cultural influences on decision making. There are many cross-cultural studies that have revealed significant differences in decision-making processes across various cultures. As an example, research has shown that individuals from collectivist cultures, like many East Asian countries, tend to consider the impact of their decisions on their group more than those from individualist countries like we have here in the West.
Yeah.
And that difference is reflected in both behavioral outcomes and neural activation patterns during decision-making tasks. In your experience, how do collectivist versus individualist cultural factors shape our pathways involved in decision-making?
Yeah, of course. Let's say if you do something repetitive, you create a sort of a highway in your brain, right? It's very easy to make a decision because you've done it a lot of times. So it's going really fast. You don't have to think about it. If you grow up in a culture where it's very normal to live together with your family, for instance, in one house, and don't only think about yourself, but make a decision where you consider your group or your family, then this is hardwired. And you can actually see that in your brain where you make decisions. They use other parts of the brain than we do in the West, where we are generally more what's the word? Individualistic?
Individualistic.
That's it. That's it. I remember my parents: make your own choices, live your own life. In our society, it's more logical to choose for yourself. So you're going to see the way you make decisions. And actually, people in Eastern Asia, they feel less regret if they do not choose for themselves. Whereas we usually only choose for ourselves and care less about the groups. There's definitely differences depending where you grow up and what culture you are part of. But in general, there are still a lot of things which are worldwide the same, right? So we feel safe in a group, whether you're in the East or the West. You like to reciprocate. If you do something nice for me, I want to reciprocate and reciprocate. Is that a better word, I think?
Reciprocate, yeah.
Yeah, so do something back for you. So all these things are the same wherever you are. But it does have influence where you grow up or which culture you're part of or which religion you're part of, so to say.
I'd like to go back to 2019 during the COVID pandemic because many businesses faced unprecedented challenges during the pandemic, which required rapid decision making in uncertain conditions. Some thrived by quickly adapting their business models, others struggled with indecision or made fatal choices or choices that backfired. What strategies can organizations implement to improve collective decision making during a crisis?
In general, I would say that it's always good to have a diverse group of people making decisions in crisis situations. So not only the alpha male, but also use some ladies, use some older, more experienced people, and also ask some younger people about their opinion. Because if you have a more diverse group, you get different opinions, which might be for the better when you make a decision. You were saying that, of course, there's a lot of companies which did adapt well, and usually those are the smaller companies. They can easily steer their course in a different direction, whereas the big companies have a lot of cash flow, so they can also survive. But you don't know what's going on, right? So if the black swan, you've probably heard about the black swan. COVID crisis was a typical black swan. We didn't know what was going on. We couldn't really predict what was going on next week with the lockdowns and all this stuff that's going on. So it's really hard to adapt. Then I would say it would be probably very interesting piece of research to check out why did some companies survive and why some didn't. What we saw in our business actually was that if a lot of clients, we do investments, right? So we saw a lot of clients who didn't do anything with their investments. They did stayed put. But there was a group of clients who needed to sell a bit because they didn't have enough savings. And that's the thing you can do. You can always prepare for the worst, right? So always have, for instance, when it comes down to money, have a savings account you don't need to access unless there's a big crisis. And you can have water in your house or some cash money so you can survive in the first week. This metaphor you can also use in your business. We need the first week to get our business going or keep our business going. And all the directions. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question here, but
you're saying the composition of leadership teams where there's diversity, because with diversity there can be expertise that can affect the quality of the decisions made in high stakes situations.
Actually, we saw our own company because we are in investments, right? So the stock market plummeted, and I am usually very fast. I don't really like a crisis, but I probably doing really well in a crisis. Okay, there's something's going on. We need to change. We need to go. Let's do it. So you need someone like me, but we also needed someone who was more detailed. What's really going on? Is it really the right direction? Asking me some question, is this the right strategy to go or should we reconsider? So that's a totally different DNA than I have. So slow, basically detailed, accountant type of person, whereas I am talk and do. And if you need all those kind of qualities to see the whole spectrum of what's going on and then make a decision. So always have young people, old people, and different types of personalities, and listen to them as well, because it's easy to, I'm the boss, tell me what you think. Okay, not interested. Really listen, because that definitely helps you. You might have heard of this Discovery or Challenger, I think. Was it one of the space shuttles which blew up after 72 seconds after liftoff? And one of the engineers said, I don't think we should launch because it's too cold and probably the rubber will shrink, so it might leak, and therefore it might be a chain reaction. And I think it was Discovery, might explode. And they didn't listen to this guy, which if they did, they could have probably avoided this disaster. So that's a main lesson here. Really listen and consider what they're saying, especially when people have a different opinion than you have. It's very easy to, all right, yeah, okay, thank you for telling me, but I don't listen to you because I don't like your opinion. But especially in stressful situations, you should listen to people with different opinions. Really helps.
Can you explain about the role of heuristics or mental shortcuts and biases in rapid business decision making during a crisis?
The way I see it or explain it is that we all need heuristics to live our day, because if you have to think about everything, it's impossible. You're making so many decisions every second of the day. You need those heuristics, right? For instance, if I walk to my car, I don't think about where I set my foot. I know where to click the button. I can do it in my pocket. Then the door opens. So it's all conditioned behavior. And you can see a risk, something which is conditioned in your brain. So you know what to do. But when there's a crisis, you should reconsider what you're doing, because sometimes those heuristics you're using shouldn't be used because they don't bring you the result you want to. I'll try to come up with an example where we can understand this easier. Suppose you're driving home. It's November. It's raining, of course. It's always raining. It's the end of the day. It's getting dark. Everyone's going home. No one's on holiday, so it's very busy on the road. Suppose I'm driving home. I'm calling my wife, talking through the day, and driving is something I can do, right? I don't have to think about everything I do in the car. I can just drive and I can talk with my wife. There's no problem at all. I can do these things together because I can drive. But suppose the car in front of me suddenly slams the brakes. So it's dark, it's drizzly. I'm talking to my wife and the car hits his brake. What do you suppose happens to my conversation with my wife? She can talk whatever she wants. I can't listen anymore because I have to refocus and see what's going on in front of me. Am I going to crash? Is my seatbelt in an okay position? Can I divert the crash? Is there someone behind me? So I have all my cognitive behavior is going to this new situation. Also, what happens when you're in a crisis, you're doing your daily business, you can do stuff, but then suddenly something happens you didn't see coming, right? Then you have to first stay clear of the accident or steer away. But if the big threat is gone, which is usually very short, then reconsider what you're doing. It's easy to do what you've been doing all of the time because you've been doing it. But during crisis situations, you need to go back and decide, okay, how am I going to solve this, or how am I going to achieve this goal, and think about other things you've been doing in the past, because it might not help you get there.
As you're saying, you have to refocus your cognition and deal with the situation at hand, because when you're driving, that becomes part of the automatic process because it's subconscious programming. Once you learn, you don't have to think about getting from A to B. And if you're talking with your wife, that's something you would do, hopefully hands-free. But an obstacle comes in your way, whatever it might be, or a car slams on its brakes, and boom, yeah, your wife can keep talking, but you've got to cut the conversation and redirect your focus to what's at hand. That's slightly different to a crisis in a company. It goes back to your answer about diversity and expertise, because if you've got a different range of people in a crisis, somebody might be more of a towards person, whereby we'll do this, but somebody may be more of an away person. You find accountants are away people, whereas entrepreneurs are more towards people. The accountant might say, oh, hang on a second, this doesn't add up. They put the brakes on.
What a very interesting technique is, what we usually do when we come up with solutions or trying to solve problems, we use what we already know. What is a very interesting technique is to, okay, let me ask you a question. So what is the best way to lose all of your clients? What usually the question is, okay, a marketing team, we need more clients. What you should ask them is, and also in a crisis, what should we do to go bankrupt? What should we do? And then this is new field. you never thought about this ridiculous question. So you come up with new things you never thought of. All right, send cards with swear words on it so the client will cancel their subscription, something like that, something ridiculous. You come up with new stuff. But if you reverse those new solutions into something positive, you usually come up with something new, something out of the box, which really helps you in that particular situation. That's a technique to re-engineer your thought process about a particular problem in a way you never done before. So you come up in a green field with new solutions. That could also help in a crisis situation.
I want to move on to AI. What I'm seeing is artificial intelligence. I prefer to call it assisted intelligence, but anyway, artificial intelligence is becoming more and more sophisticated, and it's increasingly being used to support or even replace human decision making in various fields, from healthcare diagnostics to financial trading. How does the decision making process of AI differ from human cognitive processes?
It's always good to understand that, because what AI tells us, we put in. So it's learning out of our input. If you create your own GPT, for instance, and your input is bad, you will get a bad or terrible outcome as well. It's a good thing to keep in mind. But I think in general, computers are much better and much faster than we are to rationalize decisions. For instance, a doctor in the US, which is the best cancer treatment doctor in the world, which is a computer. But we as people don't trust it. So they use an actual human being to share the results of the computer. So I think in the future, we will definitely use much more of AI to come up with decisions. However, I think the human factor will still be that sometimes we don't need a rational decision. Sometimes that's not in our best interest. For instance, it would be very rational for me to save all my money, because then I can retire early, but then I can go on trips. I can buy new shoes for my kids. I think it's very hard for a computer to actually understand your personal desires and help you with those decisions. So we need human beings to help us with that. My son, he is in high school, and he told me, why do I need to learn what the capital of Ghana is? I can ask my phone, what is the capital of Ghana? And the phone will tell me. But I read a book about this, because if you don't know what you need to ask, then you don't get the output. So first, your brain needs to be filled with a lot of knowledge and context, so you can ask your phone, what is the capital of Ghana? If you don't know what a capital is, you can't answer this or ask this question. So we need to probably use our brains in a different way in the future, but we still need to train it so we can actually ask great questions. We can emphasize with people. And definitely a lot of decisions will be made by computers already today, but definitely more in the future. But we shouldn't get lazy. Then the quality of life will go down. You won't have a understanding of what's going on. You won't enjoy a concert, for instance, or enjoy a game of sports during the Olympics, because you don't know what's going on. You don't understand. So you need knowledge so you can create decisions for yourself, which are in your best interest.
You're absolutely right. You need to have knowledge to be able to write the correct prompts and get the output so you can put the right input in there. Besides laziness, are there any other potential risks or benefits of relying on AI for critical decisions?
Let me give you an example, which your listeners can also try at home. If I give you 12 numbers and ask you to remember those and tell them back to me, you probably can't, right? So let me try this real fast. 16, 32, 47, 17, 98, 12. You can probably 12, I said, 98 maybe, but then the rest probably is gone. Let me do it again. 12 numbers, and I'm sure you can repeat those to me. Here we go. 1945, 2001, 2024. If I ask you, you can 1945, 2001, 2024, because these are years. And it was the end of the World War II, and this was when 9/11 happened, and this is this year. So you have context with these numbers, so you can very easily remember and recall those numbers. But you can only do that because you have knowledge in your brain. You have 1945 is a very important year in world history, because you know this. This is a great example why you need to invest in yourself, in your brain capacity, because if you don't know 1945, you won't remember it, right? And you won't recall it, and you won't give a a good prompt to your AI bot to gather information. So it will be a perfect assistant for us. But if you want to have a proper life with great decision making, if you don't know a lot, it's very hard to make decisions which are in your own best interest. I would definitely encourage people, keep on reading, keep listening to podcasts, watch documentaries, talk to other people who have a different religion or support a different sports team. Why do they support this team? You don't understand. Ask them, learn from them. It'll definitely enrich your life and also improve your decision making because you have more context.
That's an interesting exercise, because 1945 or 2024 or 2011, there's associations with each of those years you have in your mind. It's much easier to remember when there's an association with that particular thing you're trying to remember.
Yeah, but if you look into your brain, if you have a computer, you have your hard disk with all the information, but you also have this working memory, which you use in your computer as well. So if we're using this program, my working memory of my computer is refreshing the screen every second. And this same way in our brain, we have a working memory, which we use to talk and to communicate and to make decisions. And we have this hard disk, which is all the information, all the heuristics, all our experiences from the past, which you actually utilize when we make a decision. But if your hard disk is empty, your working memory can only remember 4 things at the same time. So if you cannot improve that with your experiences or your knowledge, it basically stops. So you need all those things in your hard disk to improve your working memory today. Therefore, it's really important to inform yourself, read, listen, talk, because it helps you make better decisions.
In your view, how do you think widespread AI adoption in decision-making roles will affect human cognitive abilities over time?
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about it. If you let a computer make decisions, then we don't train ourselves. You don't create these super highways in your brain where it's easy to make a decision because you've done it over and over again. If you only learn yourself how to create a perfect prompt in a day-to-day life, when you go to the grocery store and buy a carton of milk, don't worry about it. But if it's the greatest decisions in your life, you need context, you need the ability to create new solutions and come up with new decisions you've never done before because you have the ability. And if you don't train that, you will lose the ability.
What ethical considerations do you think need to be at the forefront when developing AI for decision-making purposes?
Yeah, you have all those techniques, right? Like reciprocity. If you are aware of all those things that are going on, you can actually very easily misuse those in your own advantage. And it's the same with the creation of all those AI things. We should create a standard, what we think is ethical. It's probably a very hard decision because what is ethical for you might be different from me. So I think in Europe, they're creating laws now where AI is able to only go up to a certain level of decision making, and then a human being needs to take a look and make the decision. Or same with the weaponry, right? If it is like a drone, it should be able to fire a rocket because he determines with his AI thing it's probably a fighter. Or should a human being make the decision? And that's really tough decisions we need to make.
In terms of the digital landscape, because that's really transformed how consumers make purchasing decisions with factors like social media influence and personalized advertising and information overload. They all play significant roles.
Yeah, for sure.
How has the abundance of choice in the digital marketplace affected consumer decision-making processes?
For instance, Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, because of your behavior, you only see what they know you like. So you get a lot of choices, but it's the choices you want to see. So that is what I always get. I do a lot of kite surfing. All my ads in my Instagram feed are pro kiteboarders telling me to buy their new kite or new whatever. So I don't get stuff my wife does. I get only my own stuff, which helps me. But also, I really have to think about making those decisions because I don't need new stuff, right? I have all those kite sets, so I don't need new kite surf sets. That's one thing. On the other hand is if you are going to buy a new TV, for instance, and you go on Google and find buy a TV, you have 1,000 choices. So it's really hard to make a decision. Which one is the best one? Recently, I went back to the electronics store to a guy and asked him, this is my living room. What should I buy? I don't know what kind of TV I need. There's so many TVs. And he asked me, okay, what do you kids play games? Yes, I do. I think choice overload doesn't really help a lot of people make decisions. Maybe small decision, but when it's a big decision, like with a mortgage, it's so much information, then you don't know what's correct, you don't know what's true, you don't know what's in your best interest. It doesn't always help.
How can we design decision-making frameworks that account for the rights and interests of future generations?
Yeah, there's something we need to think about these days, right? If you think about yourself, and if you have a great life today, for instance, you will probably wish the same life for all the other people around you, right? So, and what does need to happen so that in the future, your kids or grandkids or neighborhood kids also would have a great life? What is needed for that? If you think about them a little bit more than about yourself only, then you might actually change some decisions you're making today. Maybe fly less or eat less meat or whatever it is you think is important. So it helps to think about the future life of other people so you can change your decisions. And it starts there. We cannot expect other people to change when you're not changing yourself. So if you want to make better decisions for your future generations, you start with yourself, lead by example. What is really hard to think about your future self, because if you think about your future self, your brain thinks about another person. It's the same part in your brain which is lining up in a scanner. If I ask you, how do you think my living room, do I have a couch or a table? If you are going to think about it, you will use the same part of your brain if you think about your future self. So it's really hard to imagine yourself in your future and then make proper decisions. It's easier to look at your kid or grandkid or neighborhood kid and see that little human being and then think, wow, I would rather have them. I would also wish them a great life, so I should do this now. That's easier than to think about yourself.
You're an author, a speaker, and a coach, and you want to impact millions of people. Where can people find you? And can you talk a little bit more about your program?
Yeah, I have a book. It's called Decoding Decisions. It's 35 chapters. It's very simple. 35 chapters about human behavior. What is the power of free? Why you shouldn't ever again call something free, because we don't see any value. That's explained in the book. There's 35 simple chapters which you can read. And the goal is my personal mission, because my life is, I can't complain, right? I have a good life. I have a healthy family. I enjoy my job. I have great friends. But I feel it's my duty now to help other people make better decisions, because we made a lot of decisions and we learned a lot about our bad decisions, and we consciously change our decision making because we understand how it works. And I really wish the same on other people. Especially, I live near Rotterdam in the Netherlands. The southern part of our city is the poor part of the city. And there's a lot of people who cannot really read well. They don't have a lot of education. Our aim, reach out to those people. So the book is very simple. The goal is to make better decisions for yourself, but also to influence other people all around you so you can help them make their better decisions for themselves. It's getting a little bit more fun in the world. So we don't have a lot of fighting anymore. It's probably a too big a thing, but it would be great if people just think, what is it I want? How can I help other people? And that's it. And if you make better decisions, a lot of people want to keep up with the Joneses, for instance. They have a new car. Now I need a new car. They go on a trip. I need to go on a trip. But if you're able to watch yourself or choose for yourself, you might already have a car. Don't buy a new car. And then you make better decisions. And it's getting more friendly in general. What I'm doing, speaking about this in podcast, in the book, also sometimes people fly me out to the UK. I've been a couple of times and talk about this subject. I use a lot of stories and analogies and metaphors on how we make decisions and how we can change those. Basically, that's what I'm doing now.
Do you have a website or Instagram or?
Yeah, I do. It's Michiel van Vugt, which is my whole name, .com. That's the website. And my name is also my Instagram account and my LinkedIn account. You can find me if you want to reach out to me or have any questions. You can also share this podcast, which would be great. So people, I don't need to make a lot of money out of it. It's much better if we have world peace, right? So those are the big words, but it's much more important that we share this knowledge so we are able to make better decisions.
Beautiful. And how have you experienced the conversation today?
I have to be really honest, you have great questions. So you really thought about the questions you were asking me, and we talked before, and I already knew that you know your stuff. I like the conversation. You have great questions. So thanks, man.
If I had to do it in Dutch, it would struggle. So I empathize with you having to do this in English as well, because I'm sure if we were doing this in Dutch, it'd be a different experience for you because
Sure.
it's in your native language. I appreciate you having the courage that words that sometimes we struggle with them. It's been great. I've enjoyed the conversation with you.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Michiel.
Yeah, you too. Have a great evening.